There's talk of this being a trap game. There is no trap game here. Penn State will beat Wisconsin and cover the spread.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. This is my Penn State versus Wisconsin full game preview. Give my prediction up front. Back it up with why I think Penn State wins, why they cover the spread. If you got a final score prediction, let me know down in the comments section, but I will provide as much info about both teams in this preview episode throughout the podcast. So start off with my prediction. I think Penn State wins against Wisconsin 30-20. This is a matchup that is advantageous for Penn State. It's a solid defense on Wisconsin's part and another tough road trip, but I think Penn State is built to handle it. And Wisconsin is actually pretty similar to an Illinois team that Penn State has already won against and won by 2 touchdowns. Penn State's offense is just too dynamic for Wisconsin. Wisconsin doesn't force enough turnovers. Penn State doesn't turn the ball over to begin with, but Wisconsin also doesn't apply enough pressure to the quarterback. So the defensive line versus offensive line matchup, which I'll talk about a little more throughout this show, is one of the keys to this game for Penn State. And when Drew's at his best, it's when there's a pocket created, he's allowed to go through his progressions, and that's just not good news for Wisconsin's defense. So Wisconsin not getting enough pressure on the quarterback without blitzing is one of the biggest reasons why I think Penn State wins this game by at least double digits here. The bye week. The bye week is also important. There's the rest versus rust debate. I think that Penn State is not going to have any rust. This bye week couldn't have come at a better time with that 6-hour plane ride across to Los Angeles. And going on the road again isn't exactly ideal. And Camp Randall is one of the best environments in all of college football. But that bye week did more than just allow Penn State to get healthy and get rested. That allowed them to fine-tune the small things, timing issues, miscommunications, those little mistakes that you've seen from a new offense and a new defense. I feel like I have to remind people of that pretty consistently here because Andy Kotelnicki's system is complicated. It's complex. Same with Tom Allen's. And this is the first season for both of these coordinators at Penn State. So these players have to get adjusted. It's going to take time. A bye week in the middle of the season like this allows Penn State. I don't think we've seen the best of Penn State's offense and defense to this point. And that's saying something for a team that's gone over 30 points multiple times against quality opponents. They are 6-0. The bye week is exceptionally important for a Penn State team. The proof is there for Wisconsin. I want to go back to Wisconsin here, that they are just not on the same level as a Penn State team. Now, the common opponent here is USC. Penn State went out to USC, went out to Los Angeles, beat the Trojans in overtime 33-30. Wisconsin, they built a 21-10 lead, but then USC came all the way back and ended up winning 38-21. So I know that Wisconsin is not exactly on the same level as Penn State. They were also blown out by Alabama at home, and I would think that Alabama and Penn State are pretty comparable to this point in time, especially since Alabama now has 2 losses on the resume here, but those 2 teams are in the same conversation, being a college football playoff team. So there are that's the tangible evidence to say that, hey, Wisconsin's just not on the same level as Penn State. They are hot right now. They're peaking at the right time, but those wins have come against Purdue, which is one of the worst teams in probably the FBS, definitely the Big Ten. Rutgers is banged up. Rutgers was supposed to be a really good team, or at least a much improved team, and they're just dealing with a lot of injuries. And then a Northwestern team, which I believe has a solid defense, but they don't play complementary football. They don't have a lot of offense. They only scored 3 points against Wisconsin. That more has to do with the fact that Northwestern's not good offensively. Wisconsin has a solid defense, but Northwestern just can't put it together on offense. Keys to victory here. We'll start with Penn State and then go to Wisconsin. Offensively for Penn State, if and when they are going to win this game, because I am confident in this game for Penn State, They need to build a double-digit lead as soon as possible. Pass the ball efficiently because the Badgers, their secondary is really good. I don't doubt that, but the defensive line is not. The focus is also going to be on Tyler Warren. You'd be crazy as a defensive coordinator to not put more attention on Tyler Warren after that 17-catch, 224-yard game where Andy Kotelnicki schemed up everything for Tyler Warren. You got to focus the attention. So that's why I say pass the ball efficiently. All of the other four main wide receivers for Penn State can go off at any time, and they have. Trey Wallace had 100 yards against West Virginia. Liam Clifford had 100 yards recently against UCLA. Julian Fleming converted those 2 fourth-down passes against USC and has factored into the game plan more and more and more, not just being a glorified distraction, if you will. Amari Evans has gone over 100 yards a couple of times now. Wisconsin doesn't have enough answers, so if you sell out for Tyler Warren, any of these guys can make plays. It's not like Penn State's offense is condensed to just Tyler Warren and maybe a Trey Wallace. No, you have to account for the ability of Amari Evans, a Liam Clifford, and now a Julian Fleming. So take advantage of that dynamic game plan. Penn State can also just do whatever it wants offensively. I've already pointed this out, but Penn State is not boxed in anymore. They don't have to run the ball 50 times in order to win. They can, they don't have to. It helps when you have Singleton and Allen as the running backs, but Penn State can also turn up the tempo. They scored in 20 seconds against West Virginia. So whatever Wisconsin wants to sell out for, that's sell out for the run, sell out for the pass, Penn State can respond accordingly. And I think Wisconsin is very comparable to Illinois at this point. So if Wisconsin's going to take away a lot of the deep passes and focus on Tyler Warren, run it right at them. Defensively, Wisconsin is fairly one-dimensional. If you force them to play from a deficit, we're looking at Penn State's defense now. If you force them to play from a deficit, pass the football a lot, it's not going to be a great night for the Badgers. Braden Locke is a serviceable game manager, but he cannot lead a comeback through the air. This isn't a game where he can take over, especially against Penn State's defense, but he can't do this against a lot of other defenses either. If you limit Tawee Walker, the starting running back, since Ches Malusi, who was splitting reps with, has opted out of the season, if you limit Tawee Walker, that's going to make it even more hectic for Wisconsin's offense. I would be aware of the play action, though, if you're going to limit Tawee Walker, that Locke is not afraid to try the deep pass. They have a receiver to do that. Vinny Anthony, I think, is comparable to Amari Evans in terms of what they do, that big explosive play to keep the defense honest and maybe keep an extra safety back. But that's really it. You take away those couple of things and you make Wisconsin's game plan a lot more difficult to execute. Now let's look at how Wisconsin can make this a ball game, right? Never say it's not impossible for Wisconsin to win, but they need a lot of things to go its way in order to win. Tawee Walker is the workhorse now, and it's a big reason for Wisconsin's success. If you can get Walker going and have Penn State not have an answer for that ground game, then that's really going to be an issue, but I think Penn State has shown that they can defend the run very well, and they're still one of the best in the country in terms of yards per carry allowed. Top 10, actually. If you limit Penn State's explosiveness, secondary is good. I'm not going to deny that, but it's easier said than done here. If Wisconsin intends to win this game, that's something that they're going to have to try to do. Play into the environment. Camp Randall Stadium, one of the best environments in all of college football. This is a top 10 crowd, in my opinion. Night game atmosphere. It's another week of travel for Penn State despite the bye week. I think the bye week helps them, but you also can't neglect the fact that it's back-to-back road games like this, and they're not close by. 2 plane trips like this. Wisconsin's only way to win is shorten the game and play good enough defense. The second that Penn State scores 30 or more points, there is little to no chance for Wisconsin. So if Wisconsin is going to, in fact, win this game, I'm just laying out the blueprint of how they would have to do it, but I'm confident that Penn State has a much better chance here, and that's why my final score prediction is 30-20 over the Badgers. Now let's talk about some X factors. Penn State has quite a few of them in this matchup. Wisconsin does as well, and we'll go through the game plans of how Penn State's offense will match up against the defense and then vice versa. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but they might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing tons and tons of hats and might not necessarily have the time to devote to hiring. LinkedIn is always constantly finding ways to make the process of hiring easier and more intuitive. And that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Be one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. As for Penn State's X factors in this one, the variety of pass catchers, if Wisconsin's going to sell, and it makes sense, if Wisconsin is going to sell out defensively to try to stop Tyler Warren, if that's bracketing him, having a linebacker and then a safety over the top, just flat out double covering him, it's essentially, it's the same thing, same terminology here. But Penn State having a variety of pass catchers. Trey Wallace has been cold. He's been quiet, but he can go off at any point in time. We've seen Liam Clifford back. He's 110%. He wasn't exactly healthy to start the preseason. And now you have multiple options for Drew Aller to go to. And that's not even mentioning Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, and even the true freshman running back and Quentin Martin, what they can do out of the backfield if you need them to be pass catchers. So that variety of pass catchers for Drew Aller is an X factor here for Penn State in this matchup against Wisconsin. Secondary is good, but you got to account for everybody here. It's not just condensed to Tyler Warren, Trey Wallace, and nobody else. Penn State has shown that they have a plethora of targets that they can go to, and Drew Aller trusts all of them. Penn State's offensive line. I've been critical of Penn State's offensive line, and frankly, I still will be, because the results have been either average, slightly above average, or slightly below average at times. It's kind of varied. It hasn't been exceptional. It hasn't been awful. It's consistently been in about the middle. But where I will give Penn State's offensive line credit is that they are winning these matchups. At the end of the day, by any means necessary, they are the better group when you compare them to the opposing defensive line. And the same case goes once again. I worry about these matchups down the road against maybe some other teams, but not this one. I think Penn State's offensive line has the edge in this matchup against Wisconsin's defensive line. And then if we flip it over to the defense here, Zane Durant and Devon J. Thomas, it starts up front. If you were going to limit Tawee Walker, and I'm going to factor the linebackers in this too, but Zane Durant and Devon J. Thomas, Wisconsin likes to run inside zone, meaning that your two defensive tackles are that first line of defense. Zane Durant's had a breakout season. I don't think enough credit is being given to Jay Thomas. Those two at the first point of attack defensively are going to have to take on those double teams. That's going to play a factor and then open up Kobe King and Tony Rojas to make plays. They are going to be extremely busy in this 4-2-5 defense where it emphasizes two linebackers. Kobe King, Tony Rojas are going to be extremely busy because Wisconsin is committed to the run. It's not the same type of commitment to the run. Brett Bielema, Paul Chryst, right? The days of old Wisconsin offenses are gone, and that's why I'm going to talk about the blueprint more. But those first four on the defense are going to be very active against limiting the run game for Wisconsin. And then Zach Wheatley factors in here. Braden Locke is prone to turning the football over. He hasn't been starting the longest. It's only been since, halfway through, like a quarter of the season anyway. Tyler Van Dyke, unfortunate injury, out for the season, and Braden Locke already has 5 interceptions to this point, 2 interceptions against Northwestern. So Zach Wheatley, this is a prime opportunity for the safety, who's the ball hawk, the turnover king out of training camp. He is the guy that could have an interception, maybe 2 here against Braden Locke in this Wisconsin passing game. If he's allowed to play center field and just kind of watch, read the quarterback, Wheatley can absolutely force multiple turnovers in this game. Wisconsin X factors before we get to the actual game plan, Penn State's offense versus Wisconsin's defense, vice versa. Wisconsin's X factors, Tawee Walker. Leading rusher, he is the bell cow, the workhorse here. Ches Malusi opting out has been great for Wisconsin's offense, and particularly particularly Tawee Walker, because it's allowed Wisconsin to get into rhythm in the ground game. Because then instead of each player not being able to find its footing, its rhythm, right, their footing, their rhythm, Walker is now able to adjust on the fly and then doesn't have to come out of the game. So that work share actually was hurting Wisconsin, it seemed like. So now that Walker is the full-fledged starting running back, he is the guy that you have to account for first and foremost. Then in the passing game, Braden Locke and Tyler Van Dyke have targeted Will Pauling a lot. He is the guy that's going to get the most attention in terms of short to medium yardage over the top. I've already mentioned him, Vinny Anthony. Just be aware because he's averaging almost 25 yards per catch. So he's the deep threat. He's the big play threat. Just be careful. If Walker's going to have Penn State's attention, Wisconsin's definitely going to use some play action to try to go over the top and catch Penn State napping in the secondary. They don't exactly have a superstar on defense, and I think that's where Wisconsin is limited. At the beginning of the season, they were supposed to, and according to ESPN Analytics, this was supposed to be a top 10 defense. Wisconsin had a preseason top 10 defense according to the analytics. They haven't exactly lived up to that due to some injuries here and there, and they don't have that superstar playmaker on defense. If I'm looking to anybody as X factors in this game, it's Jaheim Thomas. He's the leading tackler. He seems to be closest to that superstar caliber player. I don't think he is one, but he's at least close, and he's closest to it, if you will. He'll be busy once Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen get a lot of the workload for Penn State. And then in the secondary, they don't force a lot of turnovers, but one of the players that has, safety Preston Zachman, 2 interceptions to this point. If you can force Drew Aller to have a mistake, it's tough to do. Easier said than done, so be it though, but that's an X factor here. If Wisconsin wants to win a game, they have to force a turnover or multiple at some point. Those 2 guys are key for Wisconsin's defense. The actual game plan itself, I've said this already. Penn State's offense against Wisconsin's defense, they can do whatever they need to do to win this game. Penn State's offense does not have an identity, and that's a good thing. Andy Kotelnicki meant what he said. We will run the ball 50 times. We will pass the ball 50 times if we need to. And they won against Illinois, and the proof is there. The actual proof is there, where they won against Illinois one way by running the football and being physical, matching Illinois with its intensity, and then they won against USC a different way, where Drew Aller almost threw for 400 yards, right? Against Wisconsin, they can do the same thing. If Wisconsin sells out for the run, you have 5+ capable pass catchers in real time. If the secondary tries to prevent the big passing plays, run it right at them. So Wisconsin also runs a 2-4-5 defense, or a 3-4 based on available personnel. So Penn State's not going to come out in too many 2 tight end sets. I mean, Khalil Dinkins is there, but 3 wide, they can do whatever they want, though. So Wisconsin's going to have to adjust on the fly. And the reason they run a 2-4-5, so that's different from Penn State's 4-2-5. That's 2 down defensive linemen and 4 linebackers that are essentially acting as edge defenders. The depth at defensive line is rough for Wisconsin. It's similar, though, to Penn State, playing to its strengths. Penn State runs a 4-2-5 because they have the defensive line in the secondary to do that and not enough linebackers. Wisconsin, same case here. They got linebackers, they got secondary players, they don't have a lot of defensive linemen here. Wisconsin's defense is sound, it's disciplined, I respect them, but they offer little to no pressure from the defensive line. They have to blitz, which is going to open up passing lanes for Drew Aller, who is one of the smartest quarterbacks in the nation. He'll be able to read that stuff, and they don't force turnovers. And the 2-4-5 is just naturally going to be prone to explosive run plays if you are not careful. Penn State's defense versus Wisconsin's offense. Penn State will continue to run the 4-2-5, especially since, and they might even run some prowler packages as well, where it's a 3-2-6, because Wisconsin, their offense is a little more aligned with what Lincoln Riley does with USC than the days of old, the days of Paul Chryst, and which doesn't seem like forever ago, but it was a couple years back, and then the days of Brett Bielema. So Penn State's defense actually matches up nicely against a Wisconsin team that has this new identity under Luke Fickell. They will run 3 wide receiver sets. They'll run 4 wide receiver sets. They don't run a lot. They don't use tight ends a lot. And they have a lead tailback in Tawee Walker. So that's really it. A bunch of wide receivers and the 1 running back, and they'll go out of shotgun. Will Pauling, as I've mentioned, is Locke's main target. Anthony is the deep threat here. They do have some other wide receivers that they can go to, and some injuries that they'll have to get together. Maybe they can get a Bryson Griffin back. He's kind of that third option in the passing game for them there. But Wisconsin will look to run the ball frequently because they're going to need to. That's what they need to do. Play to the strengths. Play to the strengths. You have Walker. You have somebody that's capable of handling 25 to 30 carries if necessary. But it's also because the passing game can't do whatever it wants. The run needs to set up the pass in this case. So funny enough, with all the changes that they've gone to for the spread offense and the air raid under Luke Fickell, funny enough, they are still a run-heavy team. It's just out of a different look. It's out of a different formation. They're playing to their strengths. Walker is a strength. This offensive line is pretty good. They're sound in run blocking because they have some, holdovers from Paul Chryst recruiting. And ask Nolan Rucci about it. Offensive linemen do go to Wisconsin. They develop well. I don't blame them for going there. In the passing game, expect short, quick throws a majority of the time. Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton are getting so close to the quarterback without getting the tangible sack. But I don't think Braden Locke's going to have enough time to throw the football. There's going to be an initiative to get the football out of his hands pretty quickly, and Penn State has already shown that they can stop this. If a quarterback has time, he's not going to have time in this case. Locke is not a field general either. I expect him to throw at least one interception, maybe two, maybe even three. And then for Penn State's defensive line, are they going to get sacks in this game? If Locke gets the ball out quickly, probably not. But if the game script flips in Penn State's favor and then Wisconsin has to continually air it out, you're going to get opportunities where Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant can all get after the quarterback. You can start to dial up some blitzes. The 4-2-5 matches up well with what Wisconsin wants to do. The simple answer is this, to kind of cap it all off before we get into our final segment. Treat this game like Illinois. Stop Walker. I emphasize stopping the run on first and second down, and then force Locke into obvious passing situations against wide receivers that aren't going to easily get open. They need to be schemed open. A.J. Harris, Cam Miller, Jalen Kimber, Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington, any of them I think will be able to handle business against this Wisconsin wide receiver core. Now, in the final segment, we'll talk about just the 5 biggest things that I'm really watching for. I've mentioned them throughout the podcast, but I want to focus on them specifically, and then just some other game info and injuries, questionable players to be aware of going into this Penn State-Wisconsin game. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. It's a convenient, simple setup. And you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So that's all it takes. Your first $5 wager will get you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's over at FanDuel.com. And let's look at the lines for Penn State versus Wisconsin on FanDuel.com. Penn State is a 6.5-point favorite against the Badgers, minus 250 on the money line. If you're interested in betting Wisconsin, plus 200 on the money line. The total is set at 47.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them all right now over at FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. These are the 5 biggest things that I'm focusing on when I'm going to watch the Penn State versus Wisconsin game. Number 1, how healthy is Nicholas Singleton? James Franklin has now actually admitted that Singleton's dealing with some bumps and bruises, did not look like himself against USC, was held out of that UCLA game, and for good reason. So is Singleton 100%? Will they have that explosiveness back in the running game? It's nice to have Katron Allen. It's also nice to have some insurance behind them with a Quentin Martin. But Singleton, definitely, if he's missing that 5th, 6th gear, that just at least limits the ground game for Penn State. It doesn't take it away, doesn't completely change it, but it certainly alters it. That's number 1. Number 2, how much better is this passing game overall? Drew Allard threw for nearly 400 yards against USC. I'm saying that the bye week is going to help Penn State's passing offense. Tyler Warren can't go for 200 yards every single game. Ohio State, Wisconsin, good defenses, good coaching are going to try to limit him by any means necessary now. Julian Fleming and Drew Aller, are they on the same page? Liam Clifford, Amari Evans, Trey Wallace, they've been relatively quiet at points in the season, even though they've had some big games here and there. I do want to see some more consistency, but that's what I'm looking forward to. Is this the game where you see them take a step forward, or is it going to be a little of the same and they need some more time? Going into the next one. Can Penn State avoid the slow start? I think they can. Offensively and defensively, they both had slow starts. It's not just relegated to a Tom Allen group. Andy Kotelnicki's offense only scored 6 points against USC. So both groups are making second half adjustments. This is where the bye week comes into play again. These are players working with a new system. It's going to take time. I think the slow starts are going to be behind Penn State because of that bye week and the additional time to prep. And now it's the second half of the season. So if the players aren't well adjusted to these systems yet, that's an issue. Number 4, if Tawee Walker is limited for Wisconsin, who steps up? Is that another running back? I don't think Braden Locke can take over, so is it a wide receiver that's going to help out? Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator, what is he going to be able to do to scheme things up for Wisconsin? I feel like the offense, if you take away Tawee Walker, I don't know that the Badgers have another answer. I don't think Braden Locke can just spread it all over the football field. I don't think Will Pauling is that elite number 1 wide receiver that can take over games. AJ Harris will be able to limit him. They'll either go 50-50 with one another. It won't be a game where Will Pauling is dominant. I feel like Vinny Anthony's only trick is to go over the top. He's not an all-encompassing wide receiver either. So who is that alternative weapon for a Wisconsin offense if Walker is limited and Penn State sells out? Number 5, what is Wisconsin going to do to get pressure on Drew Aller? Penn State's offensive line is the better group in the matchup between the offensive line and defensive line. They win this one. How do you get pressure? Do you blitz? Do you take other defenders from the back end of the defense and leave guys in one-on-one? Do you take the chance of Tyler Warren being left one-on-one? What do you do if you're Wisconsin? Drew Aller is comfortable handling the pressure and can find open receivers. He's very good with his pocket mobility, so it's not like Drew crumbles when there's a blitz. He's able to handle it. So how is Wisconsin going to manufacture pressure and then cover for it on the back end? And as a bonus, I'm eager to see this coaching matchup again. We saw James Franklin outcoach Lincoln Riley. How about James Franklin versus Luke Fickell? Luke Fickell is a very, very good coach. And that's underselling what Fickell is. He led Cincinnati, a Group 5 team at the time, to a college football playoff. That's why he was hired by Wisconsin. And they said, let's scrap everything, the historical ties of what we do for football here in Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin. Let's bring in somebody different with different ideas. Luke Fickell versus James Franklin is a coaching battle that I'm looking forward to here. For game info, 7:30 Eastern time kickoff at night. It's on NBC. It's at Wisconsin. Todd Blackledge will be on the call as the color commentator, former Penn State quarterback. If you didn't know, this game is at Wisconsin. This is just for formalities. Camp Randall Stadium. The spread, as I've mentioned in the FanDuel, reads 6.5 favorite. Penn State's a 6.5 point favorite, minus 250 on the money line, and the total is set at 47.5. If you're going to the game, if you're actually attending it, temperatures will be in the low 40s, upper 30s with some light winds, 3 to 5 mile an hour. Cloudy, but no rain. You need a windbreaker, not a rain jacket. Penn State is 5-0 in these last 5 meetings. If you remember back to 2021, that was a defensive struggle. Mike Yursic's first game as Penn State's offensive coordinator. Defense bailed them out. Jaquan Brisker had an interception at the goal line against Graham Mertz in that game. They won 16-10. Then in 2018, another ugly, low-scoring game. Penn State won at Beaver Stadium, 22-10. Nothing really to take home from that one. And of course, the 2016 Big Ten championship game. Come from behind victory. Grant Haley makes the big stop on 4th down. They win 38-31. The Nittany Lions doing. Trace McSorley had 384 passing yards. Final note in this preview episode, players that have been dealing with injuries, they're questionable. I'm not here to report anything. I'm just saying, hey, keep an eye on these players of whether or not they're available. For Penn State, I've already mentioned Nicholas Singleton. Anthony Donko has been dealing with bumps and bruises after leaving the UCLA game. KJ Winston is not with the team presently, it sounds like. He left with an injury against the Bowling Green game, and we haven't heard from him since. Caden Saunders was in a walking booth the last time I saw him. I don't imagine that he will be available for this game, the wide receiver. We know that Andrew Rapplier is not available, backup tight end with an injury. Zariah Fisher is working his way back from injury. Keon Wiley is working his way back from injury, defensive end and linebacker. And then Cam Wallace, a rotational running back that left a game not too long ago, and that injury looked pretty bad too. He's not going to be available for Penn State. Wisconsin injured players of note. James Thompson Jr., part of the reason for the defensive line woes for the Badgers is because this star player, this is the superstar that they're missing. James Thompson Jr., don't know that he's going to be out for the season, but he's not going to be available for this game against Penn State. Ches Malusi, co-starting running back, has opted out. We've mentioned that. Quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, the original starter, is out for this game, season-ending injury, unfortunately. Keep an eye out for Bryson Griffin. He's missed a couple of games. He could come back in this one. Same with Tyrell Henry, another wide receiver. Just quality depth that Wisconsin would like to have if they're going to run 4 wide receiver sets. You want those guys back in the fold to keep Penn State's defense honest. And the Kamoyi Latu, just a safety, was projected as a starter after spring football, has been a rotational defensive back for them, but somebody that has missed time and factoring more into more playing time throughout the season as it's gone on. So that is as much info as I could pack into this one for my preview and prediction episode of Penn State versus Wisconsin. Again, if you have a final score prediction, let me know down in the comments section. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Thanks again for checking out this show.